Okay, well, welcome everyone to this One Nucleus discussion with partners Zach Mummery and Robert Sacking from Reddie and Grose. One Nucleus, as a life science membership group, wanting to encourage innovation and support translation of great science into better patient outcomes through better products and return to stakeholders. A key part of that, and why the ecosystem is so important as a whole, is to provoke good questions and provoke them early in the planning and cycle of that innovation pipeline. So what better way to do that than to have a conversation with two experts, in this case from the intellectual property side, and just to talk about some of the key challenges that the life science community and the businesses face, what they maybe expect is coming down the track. And I guess there's a few things that we've all seen on the horizon, which will come up during the conversation. But equally, what can companies do about that, and what are the sort of questions they should be asking their advisors, and as well as themselves, to say what's the best way to do this. So with that in mind, I'd just like to sort of hand over, I guess, to Robert now. If you'd like to sort of introduce yourself and the firm a little bit and your role within that would be great.
Thank you. So I'm Robert Sacking, here with my colleague Zach Mummery, and we're both UK and European patent attorneys and partners at Reddie and Grose. And where we're different and contributing to this call in a different way is that I handle patent applications in the electrical, electronic and software space, and Zach handles patent applications in the life sciences and chemistry space. And we are seeing technologies now through digital health and other crossover technologies that work with software, for example, and life sciences inventions, and they act in both spaces. And it's extremely interesting for us to deal with these issues, as there are different aspects of patentability and, of course, difficult technical understanding across technologies. So our firm is not new to the idea of, if you like, the two worlds, two different technology areas colliding. When we were founded in 1907, when Stuart Grose joined Lovell Reddie in partnership in 1907, Reddie had been in practice by himself, and his largest client at the time made what was then perhaps called a gramophone phonograph. Gramophone was registered as a trademark in 1887, but the trademark was found by the English courts to become generic by 1910. So often the IP comes into play in all aspects of these technology areas. But at that time, phonographs were purely mechanical devices. And once they became electrical, Reddie didn't feel technically proficient enough to work on patenting them. So Grose joined him then to help out. And at the moment, our business is all about registering IP rights for our clients. Roughly 75% of our business is patents and 25% registered trademarks. And then we do a small amount of other registered IP rights, including registered designs and plant varieties. And our qualified fee earners are all European and UK patent and trademark attorneys. We've now got about 80 fee earners across our offices in Cambridge, Munich and The Hague, and our headquarters and main office is in London. Our Cambridge office opened in 1996. We were the first of big London firm to open an office in Cambridge. And we were, before my time, but at the time we were early to see the life sciences sector absolutely exploding in the area, and we were there to see that and look after it. And now our Cambridge office, where I'm based, serves all technology areas. As I said, digital health is a particularly exciting area. Not only does it combine tech and life science technologies, but both areas are restricted in what can be patented for different reasons. And finding a route through is not always easy. That is almost never easy. And indeed, it's not always possible. But what's really important, at least, is talk to your advisors about what can be done so we can work things through, taking into account particularly your business strategy. And we'll talk more about this, but there are very different business considerations driving patent strategy in tech and life sciences. And it's interesting for experts in either field to work with colleagues from the other field. And indeed, we're now recruiting people who speak both languages, as university courses and postgraduate research embraces both areas. And we've now got experts who do, if you like, speak both languages. They have a background perhaps in AI and life sciences and can deal with both technology areas.
Thank you. And Zach?
Yeah, so my name is Zach Mummery. I'm a partner in our life sciences, chemistry and pharmaceutical teams. So my practice focuses on chemistry and pharmaceutical technology. And I work with clients ranging from startups and SMEs through to large multinational corporations. And just staying with the sort of the work I do with startups and SMEs includes all of the usual patent-based work, obtaining, filing, drafting patent applications for clients and managing those portfolios around the world, as well as quite a lot of work assisting our smaller clients with investor due diligence and also supporting IP due diligence around some various size deals.
Excellent. I think sort of that whole bit of convergence now, and we've got the sort of the buzzwords of tech bio coming through, and can mean a vast array of things depending on the who's saying it or who it's aimed at, I guess. But it is this convergence, and there's different challenges around that. So when you look at it, what do you think the largest challenge is, either for a sort of a data and electronics company coming into life sciences, or a life sciences company going into the tech space? I mean, I don't know whether, Zach, you want to have a crack at that, and then Robert?
Yeah,
that's perfect.
It's a really good question. Certainly something we've been thinking about, and I've been certainly thinking about from the perspective of a life sciences company that is implementing some of the new advanced software techniques. And actually, as these sectors, I guess, merge, in my eyes, there are perhaps two or possibly more examples of where this has happened. And actually, I think for some companies, this has been going on for quite a long time. So, for example, if we think about medical device and diagnostic companies, I think here actually there's been a combination of life sciences and electronics and software technologies for some time. So, for example, thinking about, I don't know, a medical device that uses a life science-based sensing technology, but then that's coupled with an electronic interface with software also operating in the background. And I think those devices have probably been around for some time, and that kind of coming together has happened for some time as well. But what we're seeing, I think, at the moment is increasingly traditional life sciences companies, so pharmaceuticals, biotech companies, starting to really embrace and implement some of the more recent advanced AI, machine learning, advanced software type processes to assist with their what have been up to now very much person-oriented processes, for such as drug discovery, or chemical synthesis, retrosynthesis, processes like that. And I think that's quite an interesting area at the moment, and something that we're certainly interested in. And I think just staying with that idea of those life sciences companies that are perhaps now embracing some of these new AI techniques, I think when it comes to challenges around IP, one of the fundamental decisions that these companies are going to have to make is actually what do they want to do with these new technologies that they may be developing? Do they want to protect these in the traditional sense using patents, or actually are these better kept as a trade secret? And we'll touch on this a bit more in a moment, I think. Thinking more specifically about the challenges that some of these traditional life sciences companies might face, I think one of those could be expertise around IP. So I think traditionally a pharmaceutical company would have an in-house IP department, which will be made up of patent attorneys and IP managers that will have a life science background. So this would be both from an academic perspective, but also from a practicing patent attorney, IP attorney perspective. And patenting inventions in the chemistry, pharmaceuticals and biotech space provide or present various unique challenges. And also there is the need to understand the underlying technology. Or similarly, in the software and electronics tech space, there are different legal challenges, different commercial challenges as well, and also a totally different technology to understand. So it's likely that for some in-house practitioners that there may not be that specialist expertise in dealing with IP in the software and tech space.
And Robert, when you look at it more from the electronics and software side, healthcare is a life science, it's highly regulated. The data security issues are perhaps more sensitive than in some areas. I mean, how does that sit with an innovative company or innovative in that direction?
I think from what we see is a difference in patent filing strategy. So the sort of traditional tech filing strategy is very, very different to a life sciences filing strategy. So in the tech space, you typically file lots of patent applications, so high volumes, and each one is may only be a small improvement. You don't have a blockbuster patent. There's not. They're each is pretty relatively low value, but together they add value together as a portfolio. The life sciences space is much more about single high value patents. And similarly, in the tech space, you file in a very small number of countries, jurisdictions. I mean, we talk about the IP5, the 5 largest patent offices in the world: the US, Europe, China, Japan, and Korea. And if one of my my tech clients files in those 5 jurisdictions, that's actually a lot. And indeed, my sort of smaller local Cambridge-based clients may only file in the US. The US is absolutely the market, or it may just be UK, US, even for a UK-based company. Whereas life sciences space, typically they might be filing tens of countries, very widely. And you also, you mentioned there about the idea of sort of regulatory approval, trials and so on. Of course, we don't need that in the tech space. It's not part of the process. And other aspects to do with sort of getting to market quickly and scaling aren't there either. There's no, to write some software and distribute it widely globally is very straightforward and it's instantaneous, frankly. And so the idea, so you can be very quick to market. It's very different. But on the other hand, of course, some of the other issues with patents in the life sciences space about how long a patent lasts, again, they're very different. So people I'm sure know that a patent normally has a lifetime of 20 years from the filing date, and in the life science space, the pharmaceutical space, for example, that's not enough. By the time you've got a drug to market, you've developed it, got to market, gone through trials, I mean, that's not enough time. And tech space, it's forever. I mean, you just don't need that amount of time. We have much shorter product lifespan, and even the time to get a patent granted, maybe 3 to 5 years, is a long time in the tech space. And we often get cases withdrawn or abandoned before grant because they're no longer interested, moved on to the next generation, and it's not enough. That's still a very commercial, useful commercial tool, but it's another consideration. And that's not even having a pending patent application on file is absolutely fine for tech. It can be all you need, let alone a granted patent in force for 20 years that is essential in the life sciences space. So there's so many things to mention, but you also see that there's more patent litigation in the pharma space. Typical patent litigation is big pharma versus generics. That's typical, and it's not exclusively there. We all know about the smartphone wars, but that means that you generally, the sort of case law we deal with that drives the law generally and is set by the courts is driven by life sciences and not by tech, because that's where the litigation is and the big decisions are made. And it also then brings on this issue of patentability in the tech space, which is different to the patentability issues in the life sciences space. And so I think we're all quite happy that certain things aren't patentable, certain subjects aren't patentable. And in the tech space, it's beyond this sort of conversation to go into that in detail. It's a whole other talk, but broadly for software is patentable under certain circumstances, but it's only patentable if, roughly speaking, it provides a technical solution to a technical problem. And you might look at that as a real world benefit. And you're probably thinking, I don't quite know what that means. You're absolutely right. No one really does. It's quite a grey area, and it's unclear where you draw the lines. But it's probably, as a practical business matter, it's probably worth saying that patent offices around the world are generally against patenting software. And I think that's, it's not good for business, in my view. It's not good for our business patterns. It's not good for tech businesses or digital health businesses, but it's the way it is. And it's also one of the issues that I know, you might asking me, where are we going to be expecting things to change, and how should we be mindful of these changes? Actually, I think it's the other way around, that we're not expecting change. So patent law is actually very stable around the world. We're not expecting significant changes anytime soon, frankly, anywhere around the world. And frankly, in my view, the patent law is out of date. So European patent law that we work with was written in the late 1960s, and it became the European Patent Convention of 1977 and came into effect in 1978. So it's almost 50 years old. And even sort of new modern law, for example, in China, actually that really copies European law, and which is considered the gold standard. European law was written without a history of patent law. It started, the legislation writers looked at patent law around the world and came up with what they thought was the best solution at the time, nearly 50 years ago. But in my view, it doesn't take into account the commercial or tech realities of the 21st century. I mean, it deals with I don't think it envisage at all how tech would impact all our lives. It envisage computer programs, but not their importance, how they impacted our lives. And the idea of a smartphone or how AI would be used everywhere is just not there. I mean, it's not there. Exactly. Well, exactly. And even in, say, in the US, where philosophically they have very different law in the US, it's very different everywhere else in the world. And while there's a lot more patent litigation in the US, and case law does change more frequently, we're not expecting any significant changes really. Although, as we all know from many aspects of our, other aspects of law, the US Supreme Court it has non-specialist political judges, so they do make, I consider, in my view, quite audible decisions in many aspects, including in patents. So we do see some, if you like, there's a risk there of a strange decision, but there aren't still that many Supreme Court decisions around.
And I think that's sort of interesting. In many ways, there's something quite reassuring when I'm hearing things, but not expecting major change, because you can work with the rules you're given if people stop changing them.
Maybe it's worse that they change very slightly, but there's nothing, but really about what, say, in terms of tech space, what's patentable and what's not patentable, you're not going to see a step change. It's going to stay very similar. And ultimately, as a practical matter, as a prosecuting a patent application, they're being examined by a person, and they of course make, they have different views, and they don't not everyone makes exactly the same decision every day, and let alone different people. There are slight variations, and that's probably more significant than the actual case law. And I'm not expecting AI to take over that anytime soon, I have to say. It's often what we get asked.
Yeah, I'm not sure AI is the way to go just yet.
No, indeed.
I mean, coming back to you, Zach, in a sense, when you work with inventors and innovators and early stage, or from academia into companies, when it comes to drafting the patent application, and everybody talks about what claims are in there, but where do you think people don't pay enough attention when they're getting ready to come to you as a customer?
I think so. Some of the, I guess, some of the challenges we see, or some of the areas where inventors and applicants, I think perhaps can give some more thought, is, I think, firstly, providing us with enough information and detailed information. I think sometimes there can be a reluctance from some inventors to do so, perhaps out of fear of disclosing too much, because once a patent application is filed, it does eventually publish, so whatever is included will become publicly available. And that's a legitimate concern. Clearly, applicants do not necessarily want every single specific detail of their product or method to be disclosed to the public. But if we're given that a full picture of the product, what it is, what it's made from, how it works, what effect it achieves, then we can draft as best a patent application as we can, which will then hopefully be as strong as possible. And even if we don't include all those specific details, we can generalize those, and having that understanding of the specifics really helps us in that process. I think one of the areas where we've seen some trouble over the years in the courts, and also at the Boards of Appeal at the European Patent Office, is where applicants have perhaps filed their application too early. And I think this is particularly a problem in the life sciences space. And it's a difficult question of when to file. There are competing tensions, because on the one hand, applicants want to file their patent applications as soon as possible to minimise the prior art, so the documents that have been published before that application is filed, and it's those documents which patentability, so novelty and inventive step, are assessed. So the earlier the application is filed, the less prior art, the less prior published documents that will exist. But on the other hand, applications can't be purely speculative. So a patent application has to include enough information for a skilled person, so a scientist or engineer, to be able to go away, read the application, and then recreate that invention. So synthesize that product, or put together that smart device. So I think we see issues where applicants file too early, perhaps before they have data, or perhaps only minimal data, and that can cause problems in Europe later on. But we understand it's always a difficult choice and a difficult question. But I think just applicants just stopping and perhaps giving that some serious thought with input and advice from their patent attorneys or other legal advisors, I think that can certainly help in that situation.
And I think it is a sort of inherent tension quite often, particularly from the academic base, where your publication record is by default almost in conflict with filing patents. And how does that work? I'm not familiar really with the electronic side, which I guess you see more around designs and that side, I guess, which is quite different.
Well, perhaps I should run through the different IP rights. They do have different uses in different areas, and I think so. If we look at other IP rights, we talked about patents. Zach and I are UK and European patent attorneys, but there are also other, for example, unregistered rights, so trade secrets or confidential information, copyright, and other copyright-like rights like database rights and unregistered design rights. So these are rights that exist automatically. It doesn't cost you anything. They just exist. They don't exist. And I'm going to talk a bit more about those. And of course, there are other registered rights, as you say. There's also registered designs as well, and also registered trademarks too. And these are things that rights we register for our clients. That's our core part of our business as a firm of UK patent trademark attorneys. So looking at, say, trade secrets, confidential information, and it's different on a very broad sense how they can be useful in the life sciences space and a tech space. So, for example, why it's difficult, I expect probably impossible, to keep the composition of a blockbuster drug secret. I mean, it's not possible. You will just analyze it. Running an AI solution in the cloud for drug discovery, say, well, that's completely straightforward to keep secrets. It's a remote server. You couldn't reverse engineer it. It's all done remotely. Confidential information, trade secrets, same thing. Is useful, a useful way of protecting those rights. Perhaps for commercial reasons, you don't want to reveal it to your competitors how you do it, and also perhaps because it couldn't be patentable, so you can't get patent protection for it. Of course, the problem with it is that if someone comes up with the same idea independently without copying, well, you don't have a right. It's only if they take it from you what you've tried to keep secret. And similarly, probably copyright is more useful in tech space. There's copyright in computer program code, for example. But that's limited. It's quite a limited protection because it just protects the exact code, not its function. And it's only you only get protection from copying. So someone to infringe copyright, someone has to copy it, as the name suggests. And if you come up with the same code thing with the same function independently, I'm likely to come up with the same code without copying. But if you came with the same function but without copying, then there's no infringement. And again, so copyright has uses, and particularly in the tech space, it does. And there's some very clever ways people use it legally. But it's, in my view, not as strong as right as having a patent protection. Database rights isn't talked about much. It's a fairly new right, and it can be extremely powerful. We've all learned the value of data, and it's huge databases of customer information. So it's massively valuable, and database rights lets you protect that. And perhaps in this space, perhaps something like a database of a list of patients and their health outcomes when they've been treated in a certain way with certain trial pharmaceuticals. That's database, right? That can be really powerful and valuable. But it's really important, if you are trying to make use of that right, that you understand how the protection is there or not. There are certain steps that should be taken, and particularly one of the steps that you have to have made substantial effort in creating a database. It has to be a big thing, and it'd be very mindful. There's some fairly recent case law around this, and it explains you have to do quite a lot to get database right protection, but if you've got it, it's very, very powerful. So then the other sort of registered rights, and again, I think a trademark, something that gives you, protects your brand and so on, is it's used in the same way by tech and by life sciences, and it's a really it's a better badge of origin. They're really important rights for all companies, and probably for this space they can be very expensive, and it's really a no-brainer. Do you protect your company name and logo? Yes, you do, and you also do some clearance search to make sure you're free to use, that you're not conflicting someone else's rights. It's very inexpensive. If you limit it to a few countries, don't go too widely. It's inexpensive and really sensible thing to do. But everyone should be doing this. So in the final rights, registered designs, and again, you mentioned this just now. So again, these do have use in the tech space that probably don't have in the life sciences space. So a registered design protects the aesthetic appearance of a product, not its function. And so it might protect, say, the external physical appearance of an aspirin inhaler, for example, not its functional appearance, but it's you might make it a particularly novel shape, so it looks nice, it's distinctive, but it's not, doesn't add to the function, and that's how you want to take out the registered designs. And in the tech space, it's also a way of trying to get protection for screenshots, or can be extended to give you some sort of protection for a GUI, for a graphical user interface, and that effectively you get protection for the picture, what you see. And so it can be used quite cleverly to get some sort of GUI protection, which can be useful, particularly when you can't get protection, or it's harder to get protection for patents. You can get protection for graphical user interface patents, but it's not easy. And so it's another way, another useful right.
Just on some of and you touched upon it with the kind of design right and protecting your logo and images. And I guess I've sort of come from a background in the life science space years ago in tech transfer, and then been observing it more so in this sort of role and what other people do. But I guess the freedom to operate search, because now the world sort of feels smaller, even though it's fully global. It feels everything much more connected.
Yeah.
As a sort of, if you had a customer in front of you guys, maybe Zach from a life science, and then maybe from the more engineering electronics side and software. I mean, are there differences in approaches to freedom to operate from those two sides? Or in terms of how you assess it?
Yeah.
Differences in approaches. I think fundamentally, from the patent side, I think that it's probably, it's fundamentally the same process, searching for, relevant rights depending on the scope that the applicant wants or the client wants, but, key jurisdictions, and then analyzing those to determine the risk based on the product they want to launch. I think that, I guess in the life sciences space, because the risks are potentially quite high, in terms of, if we think about the example of a pharmaceutical company launching a pharmaceutical product, when there is patent protection in place which covers that, then clearly the risks are significant. So perhaps there is a requirement or a need for that freedom to operate analysis to be very thorough, very broadly based in terms of jurisdictions, and very comprehensive. Perhaps that may be different in the software and tech side.
Yeah, so I think one significant difference is, so we discussed the difference in filing strategies in the two spaces. So of course in the tech space, higher volumes of filing, significantly huge volumes of filing for some big players, it's impossible, frankly. When you're doing freedom for research, you often ask where we like to find stuff. Who are your competitors? Where are you? Where are they likely to be operating? And if it's a startup pharma company, there's not much to search probably. But when they tell me it's Google or IBM or Amazon, yeah, it's one of the Chinese companies, Huawei, ZTE, big filers. It's just very hard. But the other difference, I think, is again a thing we mentioned earlier on the talk, that the time to market is much quicker in the tech space. So you're generally looking at, are you doing the same thing as your competitors? And if you're not, you're probably okay. And if you are, you're probably not. I mean, it really is. I think it probably is as black and white as that, because they probably haven't got. They weren't. It's very unlikely they're 10 years ahead of the curve and had filed something and kept it, away from the public eye for 10 years, and they're doing something that's now relevant, because you can't protect the tech space 10 years, say a 10-year, even 5-year lead. It's just not possible. It's really, that's in my view the differences.
I'm conscious I've taken up a amount of your time as well as insight and bandwidth. I think it's been a fascinating canter through the compare and contrast. I think we quite often hear lots about tech bio and from one direction or another, but often it's been based on discussion around data and AI and life sciences and the biopharma space, where sometimes we don't perhaps think about the engineering and hardware side of smart devices, which are that sort of interface, if you like, between the two, because how do you interpret the data, or collect and interpret and feed it back into the loop? So the IP strategies around a healthcare solution compared to a novel target or novel drug, I think it fascinates me. So thank you for educating me and sharing those insights. It's been most welcome. I think things I'll take away from it is that nudge to people to think at an early stage, what's their intention of doing whatever with this intellectual property, whether it's registered or patentable or not, but what's the end game here?
Yeah, and the important thing from that point of view is they talk to your advisor early on. I mean, and just talk to them, come up with a strategy. A good advisor, and we will do this, is we'll tailor what we can do to suit your budget and your expected income stream, and we can tailor something to what you want. And honestly, it may cost you nothing. I've had plenty of tech clients come in, and the absolute answer was they should keep their invention secret, and that's it, and the cost is zero. Other times it's not the case, but it's just have the conversation. We offer initial free consultation to any new client, and we can more than happy to talk and work things through. If we know it's extremely complicated, and there's absolutely one size does not fit all. Every company is different, every invention is different, every company has different business objectives and revenue streams, all sorts of things, and it all needs to take into account.
Well, I think that's the bit that it is so complex. I think hearing your assessment really of in-house, who's going to have the expertise across both sectors where this convergence is happening. Again, we're really lucky at One Nucleus. We're custodians of a fantastic network of people across the ecosystem where you can have those discussions and reach out to people and grab that coffee and say, well, I don't quite understand this. What do we do with it? Even to start that process off. And I think you touched upon it, Robert, early on about the two languages. We talk a lot in our space and our events and missives about translational research. Actually, the translation often is terminology between two people who actually speak
absolutely
different fields and are a different language, or the interpretation of the same words out of the box or in the box type solutions can be quite different to people.
Absolutely.
So I think you've shared some great insights. I obviously will disseminate this recording and the highlights from it, and I would encourage anybody watching this far really to go away and reflect on some of the insights, and to come along and ask you guys if their thought process at an early stage actually stacks up. Does it stand muster, and are there better ways to do it? And I think this challenge for companies at that interface, having to deal with both of those terminologies and vocabularies and languages, as well as the IP strategies used to those, the multiple volume of patents versus the one big winner type patents, I think are things that people will have to adapt their thinking for within this space. So thank you very much for sharing your time. It's been a pleasure, and I'll look forward to speaking more in due course.